Picture this. The greatest king of England, once Europe's dazzling prince, lies swollen, foul, and bursting inside his coffin. The stench is so unbearable that hardened courtiers gag in the royal chapel. And in the most humiliating twist of all, dogs are found licking the black fluids leaking from his corpse. This was not rumour. This happened. Henry VIII, the king who reshaped England with iron will and blood-soaked decisions, did not slip away peacefully into the night. He died screaming in agony, consumed by madness, rotting alive from infections that his own physicians could not cure. And even in death, his body betrayed him. You know the story of Henry as the tyrant who broke with Rome, who had 6 wives, and who changed the course of history. But the story you are about to hear, the story of his death, is darker than anything you've been told. He died not as a king, but as a carcass. Before we dive in, leave a comment with what you think was the most shocking part of Henry's story. And if you want more dark, forgotten tales of history, subscribe to The Silent Past. It's the best way to keep these stories alive. When Henry VIII ascended the throne in 1509, he was the very image of a Renaissance prince, tall, athletic, and strikingly handsome. He was compared to Alexander the Great and even King David. He wrote poetry, composed music, and dazzled Europe with his intellect. One ambassador wrote, "His Majesty is the handsomest potentate ever seen, more than average in stature, with a fine calf to his leg, his complexion fair and bright." But destiny changed on a single day, January 24, 1536, when Henry fell in a jousting accident. His horse collapsed, and his armoured body struck the frozen earth with thunderous force. He lay unconscious for 2 hours. Modern doctors believe this accident left Henry with a traumatic brain injury, altering his personality forever. Charm turned to paranoia, patience into uncontrollable rage. Within months, Anne Boleyn lost her head, and trusted advisors like Thomas Cromwell followed. From this moment, the Golden Prince began his descent into tyranny, the birth of the tyrant. The fall also reopened an old wound on Henry's leg. This ulcer, the size of a tennis ball, never closed again. Every day it oozed pus so foul that courtiers fainted. His physician, Dr. Thomas Vicary, recorded that the sores were grievous beyond measure, stinking and incurable. Bowls of yellow pus were drained daily. The smell poisoned the very air of his court. Henry tried to hide it. He strapped metal devices to his legs, drowned himself in perfumes, but nothing masked the rot. Today, doctors diagnose it as chronic osteomyelitis, a bone infection releasing toxins into his bloodstream. And with those toxins, Henry's mind darkened further. The king who stank of death. By the 1540s, Henry had ballooned to over 350 pounds. His waistline expanded from 48 to 54 inches. Doorways had to be widened, floors reinforced, and special slings built to lift him from bed. But it wasn't just his body that decayed. His mind unraveled. He screamed at shadows, pleaded with his long-dead mother, and raged at the ghost of Anne Boleyn. The French ambassador reported Henry shouting at an empty chair, "You dare mock me, witch? I'll take your head again." Courtiers developed a secret system of coloured ribbons to signal the king's mood. Red for rage, black for despair, white for calm. One sneeze could mean death. One misplaced step, exile. Even his madness had to be managed. By Christmas 1546, Henry's body was collapsing. His face was swollen, his tongue so enlarged he could barely speak, and his ulcers dripped green and brown pus. His organs began to fail. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, summoned to his bedside, wrote that he vomited from the stench. Henry screamed of demons clawing from beneath his bed. He begged his dead children for forgiveness, whispered apologies to Catherine of Aragon, and sobbed for his long-dead mother. On January 28, 1547, at 2:07 a.m., Henry VIII died. But the horror did not end there. His corpse swelled with gases. When embalmers touched him, his liver disintegrated. His intestines were black, his stomach burst with a crack, and the stench drove men gagging from the chamber. On the way to Windsor, the coffin split open. Black liquid poured onto the chapel floor. In the morning, dogs were found licking what remained of England's king, the king reduced to carrion. Henry VIII had commanded armies broken with Rome, executed wives and ministers, and bent a kingdom to his will. Yet in death, He was no different than any man. His court concealed the truth, proclaiming that he had died peacefully, nobly, and respected. But the truth was not peace. It was rot, madness, and humiliation. Power cannot escape decay. The historian Antonia Fraser reflected. The king who had once inspired awe and fear ended his life a grotesque shadow of his former glory. Henry's story reminds us of the fragility hidden beneath crowns and thrones. History is not only about laws and wars, it is also about flesh, bone, and the slow, inescapable collapse of the body. Centuries later, the echoes of Henry's death still haunt us. His life was a lesson in how power corrupts, but his death is a lesson in how power deceives. Even today, rulers hide their illnesses, governments conceal weakness, and nations cling to illusions of strength. But in the end, no propaganda, no perfume, no prayer can mask the smell of decay. The historian Alison Weir observed, Henry VIII died a tormented man, his body ravaged by disease and his spirit consumed by paranoia. The rotting corpse of Henry VIII is a reminder that power is temporary, but truth always seeps out. Even kings cannot escape the grave, so when we remember Henry VIII, it is not just the story of 6 wives, of politics, or of religion. It is the story of a man who became a tyrant, who died in agony, and whose final humiliation could not be buried forever. If you want more untold stories of kings and queens, where power meets tragedy, subscribe to The Silent Past, where history's whispers are never forgotten.